Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back. I can definitely say we had a lot of food for thought from this session, this morning's sessions, and hopefully we are going to add more throughout the afternoon. First, I will very briefly introduce myself. My name is Simona Bodo. I'm an independent researcher and practitioner with a special interest in the social agency of museums and their intercultural practices. And as such, among other institutions for which I work, there is Fondazione, which is a foundation based in Milan, carrying out research, training, and co-producing projects with institutions, including museums, in all that pertains to immigration policies. So, and the program I run for Fondazione is called Patrimonio e Intercultura. So, what are the main themes I would like to address in this session? I discussed them with the speakers a few days ago, and I think that it would be interesting to address three of them. I think we are in a very good position to do this because we have a very rich and diverse panel who will help us explore these issues from very different perspectives. I asked all of them not to shy away and be as constructively critical as they can, because I think that the rationale behind today's conference is to learn from each other, and I think that the most useful lessons often come from, realizing the hurdles, the criticalities, the obstacles, the bias, which we have to address every day in our work, and in the vital endeavor of decolonizing the way we think about what we do, the way we think about our work in museums and the way we go about it. So the first issue is what inspires and guides us in our work, or more prosaically put, why do we do what we do, and is it useful? This may sound as a naive question, but I can tell from my own experience in Patrimonio Intercultura that many museum professionals often struggle to find an answer to it. Goals and objectives frequently seem to be elusive, vague, sometimes even self-serving. So the question is, why is it that we do what we do, and why do we think it is important, it is relevant, it is meaningful, not only for us as professionals, but for the community we serve at large? So I look forward to hearing the response of museum operators in our session, as well as to learning from the group, from the Remix steering committee, to learning about their perspective on this specific issue. The second issue stems from a quote in the Remix catalog, where Françoise Vergès mentions this iconic talk which poet and feminist Audre Lorde gave in a conference back in 1984. Whose title was The Master's Tool Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. So in that talk, Audre Lorde argued that however well-meaning we may be in our intentions, there are new methodologies are needed to really go towards liberation, and in our specific case today, towards decolonizing our gaze and facilitating real participation and self-representation. In his recent book, Museums as Agents of Change, Mike Murawski argued that museum professionals have always actually been trained to think of museums as separate from communities. hence the term outreach. So drawing inspiration from these two quotes, Audre Lorde and Michael Moravsky, I would like to engage you in an exercise of stock-taking and reflection on to what extent you feel like you have identified and experimented with new methods and new ways and tools to work and come together. The third issue, and I conclude, is the issue of structural change. So the question is, through your decolonial and collaborative practices, have the power structures in your institutions been de-centered to some degree? And always taking the cue from Mike Moravsky's book, do you feel like you have, so to speak, shared power or empowered the community, the individuals and groups with whom you have been working, or have you rather recognized that, and here I quote, there is power that exists outside the museum? Have you tapped into it? And how has that affected your internal dynamics? So, of course, this is a question for museum professionals, but I'm eager to learn about what the experience of the Remix steering committee has been in this regard as well. So I will, without further ado, give the floor to the first speaker, Chiara del Prete, who has been working in the communication and marketing office of the Egyptian Museum in Turin since 2016, with a focus on audience engagement and digital communication. She cooperates in the development of educational and social inclusion programs. The floor is yours, Chiara.
Thank you, Simona, and thank you for the invitation to join this panel and to join the conversation. I listened to the panel of this morning. It was really inspiring. And I'm going to show some images about our work. Just a second. Okay. I hope you can see it. And this first image is a sort of title of the presentation, because I really thank Simona for the suggestions, and maybe I'm going to answer to these suggestions, to these questions with other questions that maybe don't have an answer, but this is an advertising that the Museo Egizio published a few years ago on the occasion of Artissima Contemporary Art Festival in Turin. And we discussed it a lot in our office about what is the relationship between archaeology and contemporary art. And so we decided to use this artifact and this statement. We don't have an answer yet, but I can say that the Museo Egizio critically reflects on this topic in order to understand better what should be its role in the contemporary society and in the city where he is located. We know that there is still a long journey ahead, but there are paths that we can take that can be called transparency and participation through new exhibition paths, new narratives, and new communications methodologies, putting at the center the relationship between objects and people. And I'd like to give just a quick content information, because the Museo Egizio is, we don't translate, and this is another particular thing, that we don't translate the name. We translate it only in English and Arabic. And as many other museums, has a complex history that of course can't be cancelled, and that we decided to exhibit, to tell the public at the beginning of the museum path, in order to answer a question that the public often asks us, that is, why a Museo Egizio in Turin? We know that history of when the history of a museum collection is included in a visiting path is often limited to the sequence of the main historical and architectural stages. But we tried to setting it in a broader historical or socio-political context. Anyway, this also points out the problem of identity, because the museum is also rooted in the Turan life, and trying to exhibit and to tell the story of Egyptian antiquities, we know that we traverse a contested ground, because all Egyptian collections in Europe were formed in the wake of colonial expansion in Africa and Middle East. And they appropriated and displaced Egyptian cultural heritage, justified by narratives of Orientalism and social evolutionism and Egyptomania, for example. And one of the widespread distorted perspectives that these narratives have produced is that which still today considers Egypt detached from Africa and floating in an exotic mythical past, rich of gold, mystery, and other stereotypes still present today in communication or storytelling of ancient Egypt. So while most collections of Egyptian artifacts outside Egypt are housed in archaeological or in so-called universal museums, the Museo Egizio is entirely devoted to ancient Egypt since its foundation in 2024. And today, the situation is quite different because the Museo Egizio and the Rijksmuseum of Van Heden in Leiden are involved in an archaeological mission at Saqqara, and curators and museum professionals confront on sensitive issues as the illegal traffic of Egyptian antiquities in Western market and the looting of sites in Egypt, and also with the urgency for Egyptological disciplines born after the hieroglyphs deciphering in 1822 of a deep self-critical reflection about communities in Egypt that have been excluded from the discourse regarding their own heritage and the relevance that Egyptian antiquities had for community living outside Egypt, where now so many collections are located and displayed. Fortunately, today's strong impulses towards an archaeology that is more cosmopolitan and collaborative with the local community are spreading. So now we can ask ourselves another question, that is, who does the past belong to? Why we preserve it in the Museo Egizio? And the process of globalization stimulated a rethinking of the role that Europe had and has on the international scene. And in the museum world, this has raised questions regarding legitimate ownership of heritage from other countries currently presented in Western museums. And in 2018, the Museo Egizio decided to organize, together with four other institutions in Turin, an exhibition and an international conference called Status Also Die, Conflict and Heritage Between Ancient and Contemporary. And the exhibitions were centered on the theme of destruction and loss, and so at the same time of conservation and protection of heritage. And among the artifacts and the contemporary artworks exposed, there was this one, which maybe most of you know, that is fragmented by the Lebanese artist Ali Cherry. This is part of his artwork. And you see there are objects without a context, so they become suspended artifacts because they are detached from their place of origin. And over them hung a pharaoh eagle hole, which seems to gaze greedily at these artifacts. And the same raptor represents the predatory instinct of the West, and also appears in another video of the documentary that completes this artwork. Anyway, in this artwork, the artist addressed the issues of destruction of cultural heritage by pointing a finger at colonialism and the ideological use of material culture by nationalistic policies and the connivence that exists between this and art. And these suspended artifacts highlighted for our museum the importance of the context and of the biography of the object in the building of the decolonial or post-colonial narratives. also, as Danix says, also the necrography maybe of them, and in order to be more transparent with our public. And this can be retraced and taught to the public thanks to research, thanks to an application of science and of digital technologies, as we can see in the exhibition Invisible Archaeology, which is now on view, and also in the new gallery, which opened last June, dedicated to life in ancient Egypt, and the title is In Search of Life. And in this gallery aims at confronting not only with the study of human remains, but also with the theme of their exhibition and the ethical implications that characterize it. Also, thanks to a survey that the museum addressed to the public, and that you can also participate in, and you can find the survey on our website. And so we see our archaeological museums, due to their vocation to interpretation and of the past, can become important promoter of social improvement. But as the Swedish scholar Mats Burstom says, preserving objects of cultural diversity can inculcate in the public the awareness that of an heterogeneous past, that people have coexisted over time in a given place. And so observing the complexity of the past enables us to understand our complex present more profoundly, so maybe we try. And material culture can force us to reflect not only in a diachronic way, but also on social issues of the past and so of our present. So we were to be aware that we can only have a fragmentary knowledge because we interpret our past according to our point of view. And so we have to find a connection through material culture with our public, with visitors, with tourists, with immigrants, with indigenous people, in order to build a collective memory. And the Museo Egizio focuses discussion on accessibility, on education, and on new interpretation developing programs, and in collaboration with other institutions of the city, in order to enhance the participation of foreign communities. For example, in order to maintain and open up a dialogue with the Arabic-speaking communities living in Turin and with the Egyptian communities at large, the title, as I told you before, of the museum and the interpretation text in the museum galleries were translated into Egyptian Arabic, which is now the contemporary language of Egyptians. And this kind of engagement continues with the communities, Arabic-speaking communities living in Turin, which was in 2019 the 19.2% of the foreign population of Turin, continued with the co-design of participatory programs that involved various associations of the city and of the region. Now, maybe it's not the occasion to mention them. You can find also on our website the description of these projects, but I can say that the strength can be identified in the co-creation and in the constant presence of an intermediate figure, as for example Italian teachers that were involved in the design of the project with the curators and the participants. And the involvement of the museums, on the Museo Egizio in the social issues, led this association ask the museum to be part of their projects of active citizenship and of their Italian classes through meetings and visits regarding the objects of the museums that generated new interpretation of the material culture we preserve, building a sort of collective memory. For example, the project you see here in this slide, it's called My Museum, that ran between 2016 and 2017, and it was co-designed with the association's Words in the City, that for more than 20 years organizes Italian courses for migrant women of recent arrival. And after the meetings with the curators about daily life in ancient Egypt, through the artifacts of the Museo, the group of women spontaneously produced a bilingual booklet collecting their own notes and interpretation on the themes and artifacts presented during the course. And 11 participants have been conducting Arabic guided tours to the collection during special events. Another project I'd like to mention is this one, that was the first tangible outcome of the workshop Museum and Migration organized in collaboration with Città. And in April 2019, the Museo established a collaboration with the local provincial center for adult education on educational projects designed for young migrants living in Turin. And this project included courses of Italian languages carried out in museum premises and based on the history of art of ancient Egypt. And the artifacts became the focus of the lessons, and the contents were then interpreted by the young participants using their preferred media, or for example, social media, video, photos. And at the end, they presented their favorite museum artifact in front of friends and relatives in their native language and Italian. And now a challenge for the future could be building a stable relationship with the participants, because maybe we receive we know that there is the desire to do second or third editions of these projects, but we have to involve the participants, to involve the communities in the life of the museum, which is, for us, is a challenge because it's not so common. And another aspect regarding the decolonial and post-colonial practices is that the starting point should be education and training of the museum professional, for example, architects, museographers, anthropologists, or the communication departments, in order to share the same values, the same mission, to build the a new narrative, a new interpretation. And I cannot finish my speech just to answer a little bit to the last suggestions of Simona. And in this video, you can see the first annual celebration of the World Refugee Day. That the event is called I'm Welcome, Io sono benvenuto, where visitors were invited to leave a short message on a welcome wall located at the entrance in exchange for free access to the museum. And so the museum became a backdrop for encounters of people and cultures, and the protagonists of the laboratories were the participants in the social inclusion projects we organize. And this event, together with all other projects and the famous campaign you may know, Lucky Who Speaks Arabic, launched in 2017 and 2018, contributed to change a perception of the Museo Egizio that was now considered as a meeting point, a place for debate and intercultural dialogue beyond the collection preserved. I'm finished. Thank you for your attention. I leave with this video.
Thank you very much, Chiara, for this very thoughtful presentation. I think you demonstrated very clearly there has been a lot of soul searching in your museum in the past few years, and you brought up many issues which I'm sure will be addressed also in the Q&A session. And but I would like just to highlight what you said about starting from the title, what shall we do with all this past? Highlight what you said, but exploring heritage to reflect on social issues. I think this is a very important part of contemporary museums work, and the challenge that you mentioned about building a stable relationship with participants and sort of mainstreaming collaborative practices. I think it's another strand of practice that we need to address, because short-termism is still a huge problem for many museums. I mean, they may come up with wonderful projects which, however, have a very limited time span, and then everything's over and nothing is left, basically. So I think this, there are lots of issues you brought up, for which I'm really grateful. Sorry, I forgot at the beginning of the session to say that at the last session of the afternoon, the second session of the afternoon, is going to be sort of absorbed into this one, as two of the speakers, Loretta Paderni and Rosanna Di Lella from the Museo delle Civiltà in Rome, will not be able to address. So we're going to have in our session, and I welcome him very warmly, also Domenico Sergi from the Museum of London. So now it's the turn of Carolina Orsini, who has been the senior curator of since 2003 of the anthropological and ethnographical collections of the city of Milan. Now on display, finally on display in the Museum of Cultures. I say finally because it was a long process. The museum opened in 2015, and Carolina curated both permanent exhibitions, which, well, the first one which opened the museum, Objects of Encounter, and the current one, which opened a couple of months ago, which is Global Milan, the world seen from here. So over to you, Carolina.
Thank you so much, Simona. I will share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So in this presentation, I will try to give you a very insight of our experience in the making of the new permanent exhibition of the Mudec, which was a very long process and very challenging process for us in the museum. Just a brief introduction for those who are joining us only in this afternoon. Mudec is an institution that opened in 2015, but the collection dates back to the mid of the 19th century. In the opening of the museum, in the very article of the institution, we read that the Mudec's fundamental aims are to research, to collect, and to preserve non-European material and intangible heritage. And another very important point is the promotion of public participation in the museum collections. So my colleagues this morning went through the basic step in the participatory process of the Mudec, process that started long before the opening of the museum in 2010, when the collection were still conserved in the Castello Sforzesco. The collaboration with the World City Association, which is a big association that brings together more than 200 associations in the city with people of diasporic origin in the city of Milan, and the Milan World City program that was beautifully illustrated by Bianca Ravecchia this morning. So my task today is to give you the very practitioner point of view of the making of the new permanent exhibition of the Mudec, Global Milan, the world seen from here, And as Simona told you, we opened just 2 months ago on September 2021. But the process for the new permanent exhibition started long time ago in 2019, when we launched a new project with a view to rethinking the permanent exhibition, not only in terms of new layout, but also of the guidelines of the curators. The themes that we choose for the new permanent exhibition is that of globalization, seen from the lens of Milan, from the age of exploration, that means the 16th century through the colonial age up to the multicultural Milan of today. So we decided to organize some workshops that were held in 2020 and 2021 with the relevant communities to analyze the themes selected for this new exhibition by a scientific committee composed by anthropologists, historians, and the staff of the museum. So finally, we opened the new exhibition on September 16, after many changes that were made to the exhibition layout as a result of the collaborative process, which prompted the museum and the scientific committee to rethink topics, change vocabularies, and look behind the already known. Just a brief insight of the new permanent exhibition in a single slide. So I will be very short. Our narration starts in the mid of the 16th century because it's a very important moment for the city of Milan. Milan came under the control of the Spanish crown, becoming de facto a hub of the most important naval empire of that age. So the globalization for us started just in that era. The second room consider the role of East India companies in the expansion of global trade and the role of Milan in this sense, and also the relationship with East Asia and the Milanese passion for chinoiserie. Then there is a gallery that lead visitors to consider the dramatic change during the 19th century from the global relation in terms of trades and with the shift to a military aspiration of the European countries towards especially the African continent. So the third room is devoted to the scramble for Africa, and especially after the Conference of Berlin, and the role of Italy in East Africa. The Gallery 4 here is an area of passage where, through two projects by contemporary Italian artists Cristina Donati Meyer and Alan Maglio, we explore today's perception of the colonial trauma in Milan. Finally, the last room, the final room, number 5, is devoted to African descents in the global Milan, and we will focus on this room as in the third room in our analysis of the participatory process. So, as you've seen, many critical themes are addressed in Global Milan. So we felt that we need the involvement of people of different backgrounds to analyze how to treat these themes and how to really have a more balanced exhibition, treating these themes in a critical way. So we invited participants, sending out an open call through the network of our colleagues of the Ufficioretti, and we involved around 40 participants with very different backgrounds, with diasporic origins, cultural mediators, activists, but also artists and bloggers and so on. They were many of them were already familiar with the museum, but anyway, we provided with the discussion materials before the workshop, so to arrive prepared to the workshop. So in the following slides, due to time constraint, I will try to analyze only the issues emerged from the discussion of all three and all five. So, all three, as I told you, it was devoted to the Scramble for Africa, but also a section was devoted to Italian colonies, specifically in three subsections, one devoted to the history of the Italian presence in Africa, the other one was the propaganda of Italian colonies in Italy, especially in Milan, and the third one was fascism and racism. So, some specific issues emerged from the workshop with the Ethiopian Eritrean diaspora communities. I just have here a selection of the issues emerged. The first one was the need to discuss in depth the terminology to use in the new permanent exhibition. Another important topic was to need to find an innovative way to communicate difficult and traumatic topics. And we have seen also this morning that this is a common theme for the ethnographic museums. And also for us was the matter to tackle the issue of shame. And this was a very divisive issue, especially between various generations of participants in the workshop, old people, elder, against the second and third generation. What we wanted to address was its right to show materials telling of the defeats suffered by the population concerned, its right to display the booty of war, its right to show difficult images in general. Another big request was the need to tell the whole story from the beginning, and this will help rebalance the result of decades of cancel culture in which Italian society has long ignored the responsibilities and crimes perpetrated during the colonial occupation. Also, another, you see, it's just a selection, but many specific issues emerged during this workshop. The need to deconstruct the rhetoric of victory of the Italians when recounting the colonial era, trying to focus more on the attention on a shared history that affected both parts, the colonizer and the colonized. Also for us, from the museum staff side, we were very concerned about the risk of telling of the role of highlighting the role of fascism in the colonial conquest, that museum will be the target for fanatics and nostalgics. So it was really for us a big concern. And associated to this latter issue, how can we prevent the discussion for these issues becoming a propaganda or the propaganda in which the same dynamics are repeated, occupying space where to tell instead the complexity of these cultures? And then many other issues emerged, like its right to hold this workshop, using what criteria have the participants have been invited, what follow-ups will exist, and so on. So, just to give you some clues of what were the consequences of this workshop, I wanted to tell you that we performed the workshop in a process of the mounting of the exhibition that the layout was not completely closed. We selected beams. We had a set of objects that we have in mind to put on display, but the total design of the exhibition was not closed. So we had the time to, and we stopped the architects because we wanted to have the feedback from the people before having the exhibition completely designed. And this was quite a challenge for all the organization of the production process of the exhibition, as you can imagine. Anyway, to highlight some consequences of the workshop, we did decide to expose some difficult objects after many suffered negotiation. But however, we decided not to show images of injured or killed people. We personally, from my side, I was very scared about the reaction of people coming to the museum and see, for example, nudity or other kinds of offensive images regarding some citizens, some people of Eritrean or Ethiopian origins. So from my side, I really have loved to exclude this kind of material from the exhibition, but at the end, after a big confrontation, we decided to include this kind of material, but mitigate the violence of these images, for example, for the postcards that were very popular between Italian soldiers during the Second World War with the girls from the colonies. We decided to expose them upside down, so just to mitigate a little bit, but to show that the problem is presence, and that this was the image of the woman in that period. And we negotiated a caption for this kind of object that were trying to explain our choices. Another consequence was to meet the expectation of a full historical account. We decided to include a multimedia, where to deepen the chronology of the Italian presence in the fourth main country where the Italian presence is. Were very heavy: Eritrea, Ethiopia, Libya, and Somalia. Another question was how to deconstruct the rhetoric of victory of Italian and the rhetoric of ritorneremo. You know that after the defeat of Ambavalagi, the fascist propaganda decided to issue a number of affiches where with this claim "ritorneremo," we shall return, in order to say that the Italian presence in Africa was not over after that defeat. But so we decided to put in display, side by side to "ritorneremo," a big map of Africa with all with the liberation of all African nations by 1960, by telling the public that no, we don't ritorneremo, we will not return. So I will try to go very fast to the workshop we had with the African descent people for the construction of all five. The all five was designed to host prominent artists living or working in Milan of African descent, installation telling of the image of Africans in Italy, so ethno representation. And the idea was to invite artists that were free to choose what to expose. They made their own selection of the object they wanted to expose, and they were invited to write freely their own caption without any restriction. This is an example of object on display. This is a painting from Christopher Vegetti Cancu, and the caption that Christopher decided to write. So this is just a selection of some specific issues emerged. The workshop on the construction of all five were very, there were many of them, and they were very contested. In specific, there was a curator for, as we had the curator obviously for all three, and she was Simona Bere and Giorgia Barzetti. Simona Bere, it's an historian of Eritrean origin, which is a big expert of the colonial presence, Italian colonial presence in Africa. On the other end, the curator for all five was Ivan Barnia, an anthropologist. So the room, as I told you, was therefore intended to be a sort of game of mirror in which the contemporary situation was related through hetero-representation and stereotypes from the past. So this, the hetero-representation part was highly criticized by the people taking part to the workshop, and also some artists expressed the fear of being manipulated. And also there were, again, problem with regarding the use of term. The term Afro-Italiano was not widely accepted. And then another point very critical for us was the common desire expressed by the Afro-descent artists not to share spaces with Italian artists. Not Italian, non-Afro-descent artists. They are all Italian, obviously. So they wanted to move the latter in Gallery 4. So as the consequence of the workshop, the part devoted to hetero-representation was drastically reduced to just one vitrine dedicated to the figure of Mario Balotelli. You see here into artworks, one digital print with Mario portrait as an Ashanti king, and the other one, the young Italy portrait as the hero of Risorgimento. Then we had some defeat by some artists that decided not to join the exhibition because they felt not comfortable with exposing in an ethnographic museum. And then we have a contestation on the role of the anthropologist, the white curator, and the same person decided to do a contestation during the opening of the exhibition, cutting one of his work and leaving a message, no more tokenism, to the public. So you can see in the center the artwork cut, and here in this slide the artwork before the cutting. So I don't know if I have time enough, just some very quick final reflections. So the first question is, if we were we able to meet the expectation of the professional who attended the workshop? Surely only minimally. There were many expectations and many different feelings also about different generation of people who took part of the workshop. So it was really difficult to address all these expectations. The other big question is if this workshops helped us, and I can say frankly yes. We really change our way to work, and we feel that we have been very engaged in participation and self-representation inside our museum, as Bianca told you this morning, but we never address the themes of the manage of the collection and the how to display the permanent exhibition. So this was our first attempt, and I think that obviously that there is a gulf between what we can actually do in terms of time, resource, and institutional policy, and what we should do. But this is a first attempt, and I feel that from now on we can step back from this point. And another big question is if all this will really promote a change. I feel that this goes in the direction of what Silvia said this morning, that there has been really a great change of consciousness about this kind of themes inside our society, especially in Milan. And I think that the institutions are, in some extent, not so up to date, but I feel that if there will be a clear demand from the public on this, to promote more of this occasion of confrontation, also difficult confrontation, we hopefully undermine even the Italian bureaucratic machine from inside, and so this will really promote it. Or at least this is my hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina, for going through the process of the new display. I'm sure this will also lead to a lot of discussion in the Q&A session. On my part, I can say that I was particularly struck by some terms you used regarding your process of rethinking topics and changing vocabularies. You talked about suffered negotiations, you talked about fear of being manipulated, and no more tokenism. I think these are all issues which are key to many museums trying to decolonize their practices and the way of conceiving their own work and professionalism as well. And I was also struck, I might say, that to show in the display that the African nations are being liberated. You use the map with the new African states, and I've always been struck by the fact that this map is, well, actually they are actual borders. These borders were drawn with straight lines, geometrical shapes, and so on. And I think that this may be used as a metaphor and as a reminder that, however well-intentioned we may be, sometimes we run the risk of, making things a little bit more simple than they are, and maybe reproducing sometimes stereotypes rather than really dismantling them. But these are big issues. Let's see what happens now, because this is the turn of three representatives of the Remix steering committee. I'm going to who worked so hard at the wonderful program that Bianca talked about this morning. I'm going to present them all, just to show what a range of rich competencies, skills, and experiences these three members of the steering committee have. Marie Moise, who has an Italian-Haitian background, has a PhD in political philosophy. She's an editor of the Jacobin Italia Review, as well as a board member of the association Razzismo Brutta Storia. Her research interests are focused on racism and colonialism from a feminist and decolonial perspective. And she is co-author of an anthology of African Italian female writers, which was published in 2019. And Nadisha Yangoda, who is going to join us hopefully soon, because I know that she's presenting her book in Lecce, if I remember well, is the author of this book titled "The Only Black Person in the Room," as well as of a series of podcasts entitled About Race. Her works have been published by, among others, Al Jazeera English, Rivista Studio, The Telegraph, Open Democracy. She was born in Sri Lanka, but has been living in Italy since she was 6 years old. And finally, Simone Andres Olearo is a beat maker, sound engineer, graphic designer, DJ, and video maker, born in Peru, but living in Italy. At present, he's been living for a long time in Milan. He teaches at the Institute in Urban Music Production, and as an educator, he runs music workshop in collaboration with museums, schools, and correctional facilities. So you see how wide and rich a range of expertise we have in this particular part of the panel. So over to you, Marie. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. I decided to share with you some reflections about what we do and why we do here and how. And in order to answer to that questions, I'll start with a little quote from Frantz Fanon, one of the main theoretical references of the colonial thought, who once wrote that each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it. My generation's mission is to finish the colonization work that Fanon and millions of anti-colonial fighters started. Since the struggles to abolish slavery fueled the fight for decolonial liberation in the 60s and later. I simply took the baton for social justice and I carry out the mission inside and outside political, economical, cultural, both powerful and powerless institutions. Decolonizing museum and cultural institutions are a part of a larger work, which is always linked to the other domains of decolonization. Its importance is linked to what Françoise Vergès taught us in her keynote lecture we organized as Milano Città Mondo. What Françoise Vergès taught us? She taught us that museums are inherently accomplices and accountable for centuries of colonization and for neo-colonial politics, of which museums are a fundamental tool for the legitimation of a regime of truth, which is namely a white truth, associated to a neutral point of view, an impartial position, a non-political institution, as if institution could be non-political. I do what I do because my ancestors were deported, enslaved, colonized, dehumanized, robbed, and made responsible for all this violence they had to face. And they never had justice. I do what I do because today we stand structurally seated at the top of all the institutions, including ethnographic museums, thanks to all the richness and the power they accumulated over the centuries, while the descendants of the colonized people and enslaved people, as me, structurally today are structurally hired to clean the museums, to monitor them in exchange for extremely low wages. They are hired to clean what they lost because of the colonization, and they are hired to surveil them, to preserve them as white property. I do what I do because as a descendant of colonized and enslaved people, I know my ancestors never meant to survive. And if I was born and I am alive, I owe it to their resistance, their struggle to survive. I feel the duty to keep on the struggle inside this place today, inside myself, inside each of you. I'll be very honest. I do what I do here because I get paid, because I have to pay bills, and I am a precarious female worker with an immigration background, and because I do not accept to work for free anymore. As a matter of fact, non-paid work was invented with slavery, and I do not accept anymore the world I want to change. I do what I do, even if it is very painful sometimes, and it can be for you, the colonizers, descendants, painful as well. I know my words can be very uncomfortable. I know it because they touch the very borders of your privilege. And if you accept to remain in touch with the discomfort of my words, well, thank you very much. It means you are doing a great job, which is to accept the truth. You have the power I have not. And that power has to be redistributed. What do I do and how? Working in a decolonial perspective means to me working against inclusion or integration of marginalized people in a white colonial structure, but working to renew those theoretical and practical tools to understand social contradiction of the structure and to radically change it at the roots. On a cultural level, it implies working to interrupt the symbolic order and the schemes of perception historically determined by colonization. I am talking about racial symbolic order and racial epistemologies, which informs not only what we effectively perceive, but also what perceiving means within a white neo-colonial frame. That schemes are embodied by cultural and artistic productions, which works to make invisible a common thread. That common thread linking ordinary world and its apparent beauty, namely the beauty of the museums, with horror and brutality of colonial oppression. So I work on cultural representation of a beautiful world, producing invisibility of a colonial power in order to reveal it and to question what is our and your accomplice positions within it and how to interrupt it. To make this work possible, what is at stake is the centrality of the voices, of the bodies, of the accounts and expertise of those who inherit the consequences of that nefarious story and those voices and bodies that still embody that nefarious stories. To this end, we have built an extensive program around the speaking out of those subjects who are still subjected to coloniality. It is through their work that we have built the theoretical tools to see the invisible and change our position in relation to it. With these tools, I have worked on urban space that we understand as an open-air museum in which the relics of a long colonial history are still on display, daily reenacting a regime of colonial truth and making public space hostile for bodies that do not embody white power. Statues, buildings, plaques, street names, and so on. Urban spaces literally monumentalizes a history of colonial violence and makes it the only possible history. If we accept to be placed in front of this history, we can become at one, all of us, subjects and objects of this open-air museum. And we can reason about what it means to interrupt the power to look and to define what can be looked at, but also the power to interrupt a kind of neutral position in the face of the colonial injustices of this present, or the colonial injustice, and to interrupt the non-existent solidarity to those who fight against them. I'm going to briefly show you some pictures of what I called the Colonial Walks. Which represents the work we did on the public space, understood as an open-air colonial museum. Here we are in front of Central Station of Milan.
Non vediamo.
Marie,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can't see that.
Oh, okay. I have to share my screen. Maybe. Can you see now?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Here we are in front of the Central Station of Milan, whose square is dedicated to the Savoia family, and namely to Amedeo di Savoia, who is the title of the chief of one of the Italian colonial mission in Eritrea and in Ethiopia. Here we are in front of a urban market of Milan. We went around the market in order to make visible what are the production of a colonial history, the products of a colonial history who fulfill the markets today, namely fruits and vegetables, who are symbols of Italianity, while their origins are deeply colonial, such as tomatoes, potatoes, and so on. Here we are having a deeply interesting debate about the statues that the mayor of Milan dedicated to Indro Montanelli, an Italian journalist who claimed to who claimed he's proud to having participated to the Italian colonial mission in Eritrea, and who claimed himself proud for having enslaved a little girl, raped it, a little native girl, to having for, and claimed proud to rape her. What we discussed here is the power of the monumentalization of a colonial history, and at the end, I will show you. At the end, we concluded with this kind of performance, which, a moment. Okay, am I back? Can you see me? No.
No, Marie.
Okay, now you can.
We can see your face. Yes.
Okay. Well, at the end of this decolonial walk around the town through the hostile city embodying coloniality, after naming the statue that normalizes Italian colonial history, we have made ourselves a collective temporary monument, as you just have just seen, and we dedicated it to the strength of a man who has made himself a traitor of the white race. His name is Mimmo Lucano. He was the mayor of Riace, a little village in the south of Italy, who has put his institutional role at the disposal of the justice, of the decolonial justice that Italian laws don't defend. Mimmo Lucano let a Black woman to get the Italian citizenship in order to let her to access to the national health system, in order to save, namely his little son. And he was arrested and condemned to 13 years of prison for this choice. Mimmo Lucano and his institutional and decolonial posture at the same time orient us in this reflection. And what we chose to make visible and temporary is not a monumentalization of a hero, but of a concrete construction of and representation of an idea of a people that takes root in the total absence of hierarchy between human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Well, what a thick, rich, emotional speech you gave. I think you drew a very different map from the one we saw in Mudec exhibition spaces, the one we were talking about with Carolina. So a map where there are no more straight lines, but unease, discomfort, dissonance, pain. I think this is something that we should all, as professionals, of course I'm thinking about museum professionals, take into account, because if statues also die, as Chiara Del Prete was saying in her presentation, museums also die in the sense that they radically need to be reframed as institutions, starting from within. You mentioned, for instance, the issue of staff diversity and the fact that people from, so to speak, elsewhere always end up doing the most humble jobs in museums and are never recognized as resources who could really give a vital contribution and expertise to the museum's life. So, I mean, there is still more food for thought. We're going to keep it for later, for the Q&A session. I think it's time to give the floor to Simone now, because okay, it's him and Nadisha, but I will wait until somebody tells me when Nadisha has joined us. So in the meantime, Simone, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Simone Andres Solearo, and it's a really great pleasure to be here and share with you something that we have made at the museum Mudec, and the collaboration of Milano Città Mondo. I want to start my presentation. Here we go. Talking about a little bit of what was the world that we are going to explore today with this lab. Here I am. I'm presenting myself. I'm Simone Andres Solearo. I'm an Italo-Peruvian beatmaker, a composer, and also an educator at the SIE Institute here in Milan. And I always like urban genre, like musical style. And I formed myself in this way. So I can say that right now I'm a little bit of old school side of the thing, but the point is that I like my genre, my style, my hip hop world. So I'm formed in that way, and I started creating a career on this as a beat maker, as an audio engineer, and also as an educator. And this thing bring me to also construct, to build some labs in the suburbs, and keep in contact with all the people that like this kind of style, but after all, the people in general. And for that reason, I see that one of the big things that connect us as artists is that this is a really powerful language. The rap is a really powerful language, and it could be also if something that can express the mind of the people in a very direct way, without filters, without borders, without anything. So it's a really direct language. So I've decided to use this language to solve this problem that we are talking about in our first brainstorming, when we brainstorming about what we can do to bring people back in the museum, because I consider the museum a living part of a city, a part of memorial history of the city and of the world in this case, because there is a multi-ethnic museum. We are talking about a multi-ethnic museum, and we are thinking about what could be a thing that bring back the attention of the youngster in this place. And the answer was there, the music. So starting talking with the guys that I see every day in the labs I'm doing around the city, I introduced them the fact that we can go there and make the same thing that we are doing in the labs in a museum, because the museum is to me a really magical place. And so why they don't know this is such a beautiful place in their city? Why they don't go in the museum? So we started planning something that could be interesting also for them. And for that reason, I choose the rap as my weapon. And I started planning something to introduce them in this place. This was a really nice experience because talking with the guys and starting indicate why they don't consider museum a centric place in the city, and I came up with the conclusion that first of all, we are living a crazy time, really crazy time. A part of coronavirus and things, is a really crazy time for quite everybody, and so for the most of the people, overall of the marginal people that live not in the center but around the city, there's a lot of problem in day-by-day life. And so talking about culture, talking about museum is something marginal to them. So we're starting trying to engage their attention back to this place, because it's also a place of the people. Museum could be a life place. So we want to bring them back to this place to give them a little bit of magic, because it is a really magical place to me. And we attract them with this point, with the rap, making music in the museum. And that was the concept of what we are doing in this lab, what we have done in this lab. Fundamentally, with the contribution of Mudec and Milano Città Mondo, we organize inside the museum this lab that is divided in steps. So we have made some discussion with the guys, and we stimulate a critical vision of the things, but in a very natural way. Nothing of imposition, nothing doing like this, doing like that. No, it's just something that flowed naturally. So this was the point. Give them an opportunity to visit the museum and give a response of what they have seen during the visit. And that was a really, really interesting point, because in that moment, we seen that everybody has something to say, and something to say in a critical manner and in a critical way about a lot of things. We started doing also brainstorming of keywords. In searching, we were in searching of keywords to touch in the text that they will produce later, and it was a really magical moment, because you see that the youngs that have such a concrete ideas, not something in the air. So it was something really, really touching to me, and this was more or less the plan, the agenda that we made about this lab. And we had those principal points. The first part was feeding the eyes. And we took all the guys in the Mudec multicultural collection. And we flow in between the cultures, and we see a lot of things, inspiring things. And at the end, we choose an instrument in the collection to revival too. So we choose a surbahar of the 60, and we listen to this instrument played by a professional player. That is the second point, and we organized a concert for the guys, and they listened to this concert with also a tabla, so they keep in connection with an ancient sound, in this case of Indian sound, and it was really amazing. They was really touched by these instruments, that sounds, and was something really, really great. And there was enthusiasm. So after that, we do a brainstorming, and we was in search of keywords. like the image that you can see at the bottom of the page. And we put there all the emotion, all the things that we have seen and that we have felt during the exhibition, during also the visit of the internal collection of the museum. And then we start writing about those things. Obviously, there was such an interesting aspect. For example, for some of them, because I've created a multicultural group of people, I'm used to work with everybody. So I choose a lot of people from different countries, using different languages, and it was such a beautiful experience, because in front maybe piece of their culture and ancestral culture that was inspired by thinking about something that belonged to them, to their heritage. And it was really, really nice to see how they connect the concept to this object, what they have inspired, what the rhymes have inspired to all of them. So, for example, was a Peruvian girl that seen pieces of Mochica culture. It was pre-Columbian culture, and was fascinating by this thing. Another guy from Togo, they see another instrument of his ancestor, and things goes on and on and on and on. So it was a really, really nice thing, see the reaction of the people in front of their culture. Obviously, we have also talked about why those things are still here in Europe, in this museum. But it was a really nice way to talk about the things, because it was critical, and they also started to think about some of the topics, for example, of this of the convention, the colonization, on those things. And it was really, really amazing, because when you see someone starting thinking about something that never had thinking before, you can see that the mind change, the mind can construct something new, and in that point you can construct a critical thing about what you see all around you, in this case in the museum. And after that, we're starting writing rhymes, writing all the emotion, all the discussion, resume in a few lines. And also, this is a magical moment. Starting of the lighting presentation of the instrument, and sampled some of the part of those instruments, and I remixed it in a modern way, in a hip hop way, obviously. And I made a couple of beats for the guys, so they started rapping on top of my beats. And we're passing at the recording session, and thanks to Milano Città Mondo and Mudec, we could be able to arm inside of the museum a little studio, recording studio. And so also this was a fascinating experience, because the guys came in a place of art, doing art, and this is one of the best things I could imagine. And they started recording in a different session their rhymes, and the lab see an end with the final presentation in the Aula Magna, in the Mudec, and we started performing, rapping in front of an audience, and with a final jam, all together with the instruments, doing some scratching and things like that. So it was really, really nice experience, really nice laboratory. So what's the conclusion? this was really a nice experience, but what I want to pass to the guys is to form a critical way of thinking, because there is a price if we see all that culture in a same place, and so we have to think about that. And I don't want to say this is right, this is wrong. This is up to you, and so we have to choose the rap, the music in general, to try to give them an opportunity, to give the guys an opportunity to think about those things, and in general to reflect about the life, to reflect about the modernity, to reflect about contemporary things. And I think that this is a really, really nice way to give them a voice. And for that reason, I hope that in future, labs like this, or also with other instruments or other teachers, will be present in the museums of all the world, because the most important thing is bringing back the people to the museum, so the museum could be a real life thing, not just that exposition and done. And I think that we give them such a beautiful experience, because I talked with them after the lab, after the ending of the lab, and all of them have bring back something positive, and after all, a curiosity of, for example, what will be next in this museum, but maybe another museum, because other museum maybe organize something like that. And so they starting consider museum in a different way. And that's it. That was the point of my lab, and I hope to see labs like this also in the future. I want to leave you with a short video. It's like a resume of what we have done, and nothing. Just say thank you to the opportunity, and keep on creating. Thank you to everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Simone. Wonderful presentation. Talking about different languages, I thought that we might as well rewrite labels and panels in rap verses. I think that would be a great way of rearranging the museum. Well, you touched upon two very important points. One being that you can really devise ways in which you breathe new life into objects, and in this specific case, museum stores, which are the hidden spaces of museums, which are very seldom revealed. And the other one, you talked about these young people taking part in the workshop who started seeing the museum in a different way. I think this is something very uplifting, but at the same time, you know, a bell should be ringing for all of us, because if we don't keep nurturing this different perception of museums in these young people as well as in other audiences or non-audiences, then, you know, it's like a boomerang, basically. So, you know, I always think about the title of that wonderful film by Pedro Almodovar, Broken Embraces. I think we all have to avoid breaking the embrace that we managed to create, people and objects, people and institutions. So thank you so much, Simone.
Thank you.
I see that Nadisha Yangoda has joined us. I know she's got a very short time spent to jump in. I saw her coming in. I don't know whether she's still with us. Otherwise, I will give the floor to Domenico. Nadisha, are you there? I'm looking at participants. No. Oh, yes. I see her. Cristina, maybe you can help us understand what's not going right.
I don't know. I saw Nadisha. I think she.
No, now she's no longer in the participants.
Yeah.
She must have left.
Here is.
She's back in. Okay, wonderful. Hi, Nadisha.
Hi, I'm
welcome and thanks for joining us. I already presented you, so the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll be really quick. As Simona presented me, my name is Nadisha Yangoda, and I'm a freelance journalist and writer. My work focuses mostly on concepts such as race, identity, and migration. And so this, my contribute to this is public program Milano Remix was a podcast that reflects on language and on speech patterns, because quoting Bell Hooks, language as well is a place of struggle, and because the language itself replicates power structures. And so the podcast La Cura delle Parole, this is the title of the podcast, aims to claim the language, the Italian language for instance, as a space of resistance, and a space where racialized communities and a space where racialized people can contribute to dismantle outdated and derogatory words and terms, trying to forge an alternative, a new cultural production. The podcast as a tool is as a meaningful tool because it literally let us pass the microphone to someone else, to people usually underrepresented in museums and more in general in cultural fields. And a podcast calls also for the recognition of voices that are often silenced, censored, or marginalized. And ultimately, a podcast changes the narrative. In my opinion, the podcast La Cura delle Parole was useful at some extent, at least, because it gives a different perspective on the Italian language. And the podcast asserts that the subject speaking and writing in Italian, and also the subject changing the way we speak, isn't anymore white and male. However, I'm also aware of its limit in terms of deconstructing museums' power structures, because a podcast is a tool that doesn't have an impact on cultural institutions, on museum policies, and on exhibitions if they continue to reinforce colonialist discourse and Orientalist imagination. But I like to think that we can change these institutions and museum policies and exhibition starting from the language. And I want to think of the language as a space of resistance, as a place of struggle, as Bell Hooks puts it. And I want to conclude this brief introduction of the project La Cura delle Parole with a video we created for the word blackface, which is a word well known in the Anglo-American context, but in Italy not so much. Just a second.
Nadisha, are you having problems sharing the video, I gather? Are you there? Because until you find a solution, I might want, I might like to ask you a question. Oh, well, she's coming back.
I'm sorry, it seems I can't share my screen.
She's disappeared once again.
I'm sorry, it seems I can't share my screen.
Nadisha, can you maybe copy and paste the link?
Sure.
So that we can see it later, because we know you have to run. Or
yes.
Can you stay with us a bit, or what?
Yes, I can stay with you a bit, but it seems I can't share my screen. However, I'm copy pasting the link in the chat.
Okay. Nadisha, how long can you stay with us? Because we'll have, after Domenico's presentation, the Q&A session, but I don't know whether you will be with us at that time. So how much time have you left?
I have 30 minutes, more or less. So
30 minutes. Okay, so let's, maybe, is anybody who would like to ask a question to Nadisha about her work?
I can share the video if you want.
Oh, okay. We have the video now. Okay, great.
Blackface. Si tratta di un trucco scenico che dipinge il viso di nero e modifica i tratti somatici di un attore o di un comico, ad esempio labbra pronunciate e naso marcato. I minstrel show, sorti nell'Ottocento, erano una forma di intrattenimento popolare in cui attori bianchi, col volto annerito, imitavano in modo caricaturale la parlata, i gesti, il canto, i balli e le tradizioni degli afroamericani. Negli Stati Uniti divenne una pratica inaccettabile dopo che il movimento per i diritti civili tra gli anni 50 e 60 lanciò una massiccia campagna non solo per abolire i minstrel show, ma anche per eliminare forme di blackface dalla cultura e dalla letteratura popolare. Più recentemente, una nuova ondata di proteste antirazziste ha costretto storici brand a modificare nomi e merchandising apertamente razzisti e che spesso facevano riferimento alla pratica del blackface. Bisogna domandarsi se sia legittimo trasferire la connotazione razzista del blackface alla società italiana. La risposta è che, pur dovendo tener conto dei diversi significati del concetto di razza nelle realtà nazionali, sono tutte declinazioni locali di un ordine razziale globale.
Thank you, Nadisha. If I can take the opportunity, because I don't know if we'll have time to take questions for you, I would like to ask very quickly. You mentioned that podcasts are tools which have a very limited impact on museum displays. So if you had the opportunity to be a museum director or curator for some time, what would you do?
Well, I'd give more space to Black artists and racialized artists, because I think that in Italy, Black artists and racialized communities can show their art in private spaces and not in public spaces. Black artists don't exist in public museums, just in private spaces.
Okay, let's take note of that, and hopefully after Domenico's presentation, you will still be with us and maybe take some more questions. Thank you, Nadisha. So now it's the turn of Domenico Sergi, who is a senior curator at the Museum of London. He is currently leading a contemporary collecting project called Curated London. He has different degrees ranging from sociology to anthropology to finish with his PhD on refugee studies. And he recently published with Routledge a wonderful book entitled Museums, Refugees and Communities. Over to you, Domenico.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. Let me just see if I can share this screen. Is usually the worst part. Thank you for your introduction, Simona, and I'm really sorry for not being able to join the discussion this morning. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. It's really interesting to have sat in this panel, and I just wanted to thank all the speakers for the really fascinating discussion points and insights that have shared with us. And I'm honored to be entrusted with some of these very delicate conversations and very important points that particularly our last few speakers have raised in relation to positionality and importance of ethical care, to cite a few. What I would like to discuss with you today is a project, as Simona was saying, called Curated London, which I think speaks to some of the points that have been raised so far in the conversation this afternoon. So Curated London is a contemporary collecting program which aims at capturing Londoners' lived experience. Is a sort of 4 years program that kind of captures the breadth and depth of 21st century London life. And as part of the, I guess, collecting, engagement and display work undertaken, the team since 2018 has grappled with fundamental questions regarding contemporary curatorship, from issues of ethics, polyvocality, power and knowledge to concern surrounding value, decentering practice, and repatriations, to cite a few. So the Curated London program has translated into a number of ambitious projects which have tackled sensitive issues and subjects and broken different curatorial ground, testing innovative research-led methodology. They're contributing to the museum transformation agenda. Now, I guess what I have to add to this, having reflecting back to some of the presentation before, is that one of the most important parts of the work that we're trying to do is to bring ethics at the core of the practice. And I hope that I will show you a few examples of how we might have done this, but particularly bringing curatorial and engagement very close to each other. Now, we see that diversity in the broad terms is generally survives in programming and engagement practice. So we saw brilliant examples of how creativity is allowed to flourish at the periphery of museum content. But I guess what we're trying to do with this is to bring content that is generally relegated to programming and engagement into curatorial practice. So just a little bit of context, we are building a new home. A new Museum of London is a large investment in the city, which will take, and also quite problematic one, because it's part of a wider questions around gentrification of urban areas. I have to say that this area has been long gentrified, so we could have a conversation around this as well. So it will occupy a derelict part of a building that used to be a Victorian market, and it was about to be converted into yet another rows of luxury flats. And somehow the museum has convinced the developers to build a museum instead, which is quite unusual. So this is a very long sort of time span. We're hopefully to open in 2016. There's going to be 2 buildings, a train passing through it underneath. So it's a quite complex capital work. But also we have another sister museum, the Museum of London Docklands, which is very close to our practice in terms of Curated London. The Museum of London Docklands is in the Docklands in London, so it's very much establishes the link between London and the Empire, addressing the responsibilities, the importance of highlighting London links to Empire, which is something that we have seen very clearly last summer with the Black Lives Matter protests, which have led to this very beautiful picture of topping of the statue of Robert Milligan, who uncomfortably sat in front of the museum, being not property of the museum, but on the same sort of area where the museum arises. Now, I was there filming like those people, and I have to say that we also were able to acquire, to accession into the permanent collection of the museum, the video of the removal of the statue. At the moment, we are in conversation with the Mayor of London about the future of the statue, and we also have acquired the kitenge cloth and the Black Lives Matter placards that was covering the statue. This is in response to legitimate questions about how much we need to reflect on the built environment in our contemporary curatorial practice. I just want to give a little bit of curatorial research context, I guess, of how I come into this practice and how Curated London comes into this practice, just a little bit of a flavor. So Curated London is situated within a large stream of research and practice dealing with museum work with communities, and builds upon debates that is introduced into fields by cognate disciplines such as anthropology, sociology, and material cultural studies, to cite a few, of course. But these long-run developments in museum scholarship and practice have questioned the role and purpose of museum, and people have said this for quite some times. And it is important for us to focus on issues of democratic access, collaboration, and participation with museum partners and communities. But it's very important for me professionally and personally, as a queer working class migrant and somebody that is another within this very society they are inhabit, to also reflect on questions of power and knowledge and authority of knowledge, and particularly Anglocentrism. I mean, obviously, I'm talking from an androcentric perspective and using we are all using this, and there is a question, I think, of the centering knowledge production in the Anglosphere, which I think would be an important part of, for me, the curatorial practice of the future. But let's not forget, as we move into this kind of ideas of coordinates, that these very debates of community participations were in fact introduced in America South, particularly around the need of cultural agencies to play an active role in untangling the oppressed from ideological hegemony. Of course, I'm talking about Paulo Freire. I'm talking about the pedagogy of the oppressed. But the program also draw on reflection on the notions of the eco-museum that plays ecology in its widest sense at the heart of museum practice, and is also shaped by the consideration of our very own Museo diffuso that was adopted in Italy to describe a modern museum reaching out to local territories, communities, and partnerships. So I think the last 2 decades, particularly in the UK, seems to have reinvented the wheel on this, forgetting that there is a large context of participation and scholarship and practice that has originated elsewhere. Obviously, central to the debates of Curated London are also the debates and around the notion of contact zone that was born in kind of post-colonial theory to understand the nature of the relationship and participation between museums and their communities. There are lots of examples of similar projects which I'm not gonna sort of dwell upon, but perhaps we could discuss if it's of interest in the Q&A. And I guess reflecting on practice before I introduce you to some of the project, one of the things that we really wanted to do is to reflect very carefully about how we could avoid replicating structures of dominations and how we could actually produce and reproduce reparatory justice in our collecting practice. And this meant changing models of collaboration. And I'm really happy that Marie has raised the questions of payment, because this is one of the crucial things that we have embarked upon as an organizational battle, is to make sure that there would be a careful consideration of how we paid our collaborator and retributed our collaborators, and particularly those that contributed to knowledge exchange and production into the museum. There is also question central to our work is the questions of emotional labor, of the fact that this type of work, both for the sort of organizational advocacy that it entails and the external expenditure that emotionally is needed, means that people are at the front line of sometimes uncomfortable and very crucial conversation, which, borrowing again from feminist practice, we framed around the notion of emotional labor. Organizational change is certainly complicated, and this is one of the things that is like an undone business. And I hope that in the next few years we will be able to have a model that we can leave to the next generation of curators. But in the meantime, there have been certain gains. Obviously, you can't do this work if you don't have the right type, the right curators and the right people to do this. And I'm very pleased to say that we have improved our recruitment practice, has increased by 25% the representation of people of the global majority in the curatorial departments. I prefer people of the global majority to more sort of widely used terms like Black and ethnic minorities, etc., because I think that again, the language, the words, as our last speaker said, are very important and are a political act. But the bulk of the matter here is that our curatorial department is more diverse than it was before Curated London started. We also created a curatorial working group that shares the learning around ethics and collaboration with other curators who don't do contemporary culture collecting as we do, so that there could be a constant reflection upon how we use the past, again, to rephrase a question that Chiara first poses us: how can we use the past to do this? Curated London is animated a very broad research questions, including what does it mean to be a Londoner in the 21st century? How can we enhance people lived experience in our collection, and how can we develop more respectful approaches to collecting practices? So far we have worked extensively around different boroughs of London. This is actually not an updated maps. Every year we run at least 5 projects and 2 researches in collaboration with universities, which we manage. So it's a massive program which can have its challenges, but it also has got its opportunities, I guess, in terms of making us a bit happier as people and professional. So what does this mean in practice? So the Curated London program is translated into a number of ambitious projects, and different types of research approaches and methodology have been mobilized to document and collect Londoners' lived experience, spanning from academic to community research, from social art practice to large surveys. These approaches have informed all stages of curatorial work, from scoping potential collecting foci to collecting objects and designing displays and public programs. I'm not going to be able to go through the entire wealth of projects that we run so far, so I've chosen a few. This is a part of an exhibition which is currently on display at the Museum of London Docklands, and is called Feeding Black: Community, Power and Place, which looks at the legacy and importance of Black-owned businesses in southeast of London. So we commissioned a Greenwich residence, so long before the exhibition emerged as a concept. We scoped potential conceptual opportunity in a large community research commission that we launched. So we invited people from the neighborhood which didn't have any idea of museum practice to respond to this, a very simple question: what if we were to speak about something that matters to Greenwich? What should this be? And a number of things came up, and including this proposal around Black-owned businesses. So we commissioned this research to this person, who then became our main consultant for developing the exhibition. So in a way, we brought from the very early stage of the research concept to the delivery of the exhibition. We worked in collaboration with people, and obviously here you see some of the people we work with, owner of an African cash and carry, the first African cash and carry in London, and 2 sisters that runs a vegan Jamaican restaurant, which is really popular. We also commissioned the cab driver and video maker to produce a concept test for a documentary on the London grime scene. So, and right now we are in production to then move on to the delivery on exhibitions around London grime. And again, we had big displays around dub culture. Music, again, was an important part of this. We collected a soundtrack of an entire day of Notting Hill Carnival, which included 7 hours of recording. Unfortunately, we couldn't collect the sound system because I understand that that's of quite an importance for Channel 1, which is the most important sound system of Notting Hill Carnival. But we did work in collaboration with one of the with a owner of a record shop called Papaface, to build a functioning record shop, which actually was within the exhibition. So we had an exhibition which closed about 3 months ago, was on for about a year, where we had a functioning record shop where people could also buy records, as well as interacting with the stories surrounding the importance of the relation between dub, reggae, and the City of London. We also trained and commissioned young people from various parts of London to document the lived experience of their community. A very quick example of this is this project called Collecting Ends. Here is a picture of us of some of the team, not everyone, in pre-pandemic times, where my hair was shorter and I looked younger. So in this context, we worked in a shopping center, and the young people were invited to develop sort of interview their own families and friends, and we collected a large number of oral histories. So we trained young people in collecting oral history, and these oral history, about 20 oral history, now belong to the Museum of London permanent collection. And I just want to stress that everything I'm talking to you about today are part of accessioned material into the permanent collection. We also tested this process, and we are now in the actually commissioning some micro grant for young people aged 16 to 24. So we have closed a sort of micro grant scheme a few days ago, when we invited young people to respond to proposal around the relation between London and food and drink, very broad, and we received about 100 applications. So now we have shortlisted 4, and those 4 people, each one of them will receive £1,000 budget and training from the museum for them to collect objects and stories that relate to the identified food and drink businesses. We also been running quite a fair amount of academic research in collaboration with academic universities on particular collecting projects. So in this, the idea is to bring research at the core of content practice and acquisition. So I've commissioned a project to King's College to look at the impact of working class Londoners, the impact of COVID on working class Londoners, on people from working class backgrounds. And as part of this, we have collected around 50 oral histories with delivery, food drivers, with cleaners, with people that have worked throughout the pandemic, so whose life experience are not as represented, and we have accessioned this into the collection. Right now, we are doing a project with the Institute of Archaeology, UCL, looking at the experience of food knowledge and allotment holders. This is part of a wider project around food, which we are doing this year. Also, we have done a project around Brexit, and I just want to spend like a couple of minutes on this, because it's interesting that being Brexit was one of the most certainly traumatic social history experiences of the modern contemporary in Britain. You will be surprised to know that we are one of the very few museums in the country that have done a collecting project around Brexit. And so we have done this for a project called Brexit Talks, when we went all around London recording oral histories and how people voted in the referendum. This was then followed up a year and a half later by some more longitudinal work, where we went back essentially to those people, to 10 of those people, and run 10 more in-depth, long format oral histories to understand whether the sort of their perceptions and voting intentions might have changed. We also toyed with the idea of what constitutes a museum object. This is, I just included this because it might be of interest of, I don't know, some archaeology, contemporary archaeological practice. So we've been very interested in how we can invest, how places in London, not only people, can contribute to understand the social life of the city. So we run the contemporary archaeology of a big park, using documentation technique of sort of archaeological methods to document field sites, but also to collect objects that in other realms and in certain realms would be reputed as rubbish, but that we think have got a very strong and important role to play in contemporary urban culture. And I close because I understand that I might have gone over time. An important part of also what we're trying to do is to reflect on social practice. Now, there is a lots of ways in which artist collaborations in museums are called. Some people call them social art practice, some other people call it social practice. I prefer the word social practice, but it is to signal the instances whereby an artist that has got a strong community-led sort of focus, and we have seen a couple of colleagues and speakers that have presented before with this type of sort of intervention, that work with certain communities to record their stories. And again, we have produced a number of certain commissions. We have commissioned a couple of artists to work with young people in the borough of Brixton to look at legacy of activism in the borough, and how young and old activists could talk to each other. There is a particularly interesting reality in Brixton called Advocacy Academy that trains young people to become advocates, which is an interesting concept, and it works quite well in the context of our documentary. And we also worked on with a number of commissions, including this one I want to really quickly touch upon, where we worked with an artist to produce some wallpapers, a wallpaper with reflecting on people experiences of COVID with those affected by the mental health issues. And we acquired both the wallpaper as a main artistic outcome, but also the individual contributions that each of the participants made, together with some audio notes that reflected upon this. So it's that is very much what I've prepared, and I know it was a very quick whistle-stop tour, and on many concepts that you know, I will welcome your comments and suggestions. But thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Domenico. It was breathtaking to follow you into this huge work you have been doing with Curated London. I think that this issue of embedding engagement in curatorial practices is a crucial point in how we want to create new tools which will sidestep the existing ones. And another thing that I mean, among the many different issues which you touched upon, which are of course all worthy of being further discussed in the Q&A session, I thought that when you said bring in ethics at the core of your practice is a very important statement, because we tend to forget that not only citizens are rights holders, but museums and institutions more in general are duty bearers. So they have a specific responsibility to engage citizens, to develop those critical thinking skills that we all badly need, especially in these troubled times. And I think that what you showed us through your presentation is a very concrete example of how this can be done. But I don't want to take time from questions might come from the audience as well as the group. Okay, so I see a first question for Simone. In the video we saw of your rep workshop, where boys and girls played and recorded the sound of some instruments from the museum's collections. How was this experience of such direct contact with the museum object?
I want to clarify, first of all, that the instrument was touched and played just by the professionals players. So that's the first thing. But they are played the instruments in front of the group. So it's quite like the same thing, because we were so close, and we have the opportunity to see those instruments, the particular carving of the instruments, and we asked a question about these instruments, and it was really touching thing, because they have the opportunity to see something that was closing in a museum, taking life again, and this is a really nice thing, and the people appreciated the fact that something that is just a dead object come back to life. So it was a really nice emotion that everybody enjoyed. And I hope maybe in the future, if there's opportunity to repeat some labs like this, it will be wonderful.
Thank you, Simone. Another question. This is for Domenico, regarding the statues in the squares that reveal the power of public art in arising strong and controversial feelings after decades, centuries. Someone proposed to place them in the museum or to move them to the base of the pedestal. What kind of choices can give real listening to the community that rejects the image, even when not in a collective way?
I hope I understood the question right. I'm going to attempt to unravel this complex question. So first of all, what happened to the statue? The statue is at the moment in a warehouse. And what we have launched a big consultation with our local with the local groups, but also with stakeholders from the Museum of London Docklands to understand what we should be doing with that. One thing that I didn't mention is that one of the most important galleries that is housed in the Museum of London Docklands is called London Sugar and Slavery Gallery, which looks particularly at the context of the dealings in and out of London. And the building itself as a warehouse is the most interesting object, because it's the warehouse where sugar, spices came from West Indian society. So it's kind of like in itself is an interesting context. But back to the statue, I think what the statue gives us an opportunity is absence at the moment. So at the moment, the absence in the pedestal gives the opportunity to articulate on a practical level, to commission artists to respond to that, not in a very similar way that the pedestal 6 is doing in the Trafalgar Square for that matter, but also to reflect around, to open a conversation about white fragility. I mean, that is the question. The question is like, expose white fragility, expose there is no such a thing as uncomfortable conversation. The conversations are uncomfortable because people made them uncomfortable, not because they are uncomfortable. Certain conversation needs to happen, and certain sort of responsibility needs to be taken. So I guess that we are embarking with that statue in a process of working together with our partners to understand what to do and how to articulate those conversations. I think what has been very important is that we did not shy away from the responsibility of the museum to occupy that space of conversation.
Thank you, Domenico, for your insights. Does anybody else on the panel have anything to say about this subject of removing statues, placing them elsewhere? No? Okay, so we'll pass to the next question, which is for Marie. Following your stimulating remarks, contemporary Western society will never be able to give back what it has taken away from colonized countries for centuries. The grandchildren of the colonizers undoubtedly enjoy the privileges that come with it, nor can we indiscriminately burden our ancestors with guilt. What could be a way to involve descendants more equitably in a plural museum itinerary? That's a tough one, Marie.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the question. And, you know, when slavery was legal, the debate in Europe was very similar to this question. They used to say, Western people as slaves will never be able to be free. They are not capable of democracy, they are not capable of understanding freedom, so it will never happen, and so on. Just as someone today says, Western societies will never be able to give back. No.
Yeah, Marie, we can't hear you. You're freezed. Or frozen, I should say. Well, while we wait for Marie to reconnect, maybe give her a few more seconds. Otherwise, oh, no. Okay, we'll go to we'll jump to the next question and then go back to Marie when she's able to be with us once again. So the other question is, just yesterday, Ken Loach refused an award from the Cinema Museum of Turin in protest for the working condition of the external collaborators of the museum. He underlined that their work is also the responsibility of the museum. Do we need more Ken Loach? Oops, sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened.
Yeah. We just lost you for some time, so maybe we have to.
Yes,
go back a few
to synthesize
steps. Yes.
Yes.
Rewind.
Well, saying something. Yes. When we say that something will never happen, we are just reproducing the colonial regime of truth, which has all the interest to negate what can actually happen. So when slavery was legal, everybody used to say slavery will never be abolished. Women will never get the right to vote. Colonies will never be dismantled. Nevertheless, yet everything happened, and it happened thanks to mobilization and struggles. And I do not agree. They will be forced to do it when mobilization will be as strong to impose this, exactly as they has imposed the conviction of the murder of George Floyd, just to make an example. So concerning museum, I would say just let colonized people manage what already belongs to them. Museums, I mean. And you will see what is possible. And well, colonized descendants, I think it's important to distinguish. It's a linguistic distinction, but it is crucial. Colonized descendants, in my readings of situation, do not ask to be involved. To have their power back, which is very different. It is a matter of power.
It's a shame. Marie's connection is coming and going.
Yeah, it's true. It's a very hard question to answer, but if I can say something about that.
Absolutely, absolutely, Chiara. Please.
It's one of the questions I ask myself before, is whose the past belongs to, because for example, when a collection, for example, the collection of Museo Egizio is part of the city, I think that a lot of people have visited the museum at the elementary school, so it's part of the life of the city, and so it's a legacy that belongs to whom. It's difficult to say. So I understand there are colonist descendants, and it's hard to say also, because there is a lot of melting pot, because, for example, the contemporary Egyptians are not the same, because have not the same Egyptians that lived at the same time of the artifacts we preserve in the museum. So I think it's an open question. I just wanted to say, like, for example, for Greece, we say who is the descendants of Greece, if we think to Sicily, and so we should be always transparent with the history of the collections, and to consider the context and the life that the objects have also after their diaspora, which is a trauma. And so I refer to what Denix says in its book, The Brutish Museum, when he says that if maybe the Benin bronzes go back to Senegal, this is not the end of the life of these objects and of the life of the museum, because the conversation goes on, because we have to be able to accept changes. And so just a reflection about that.
Thank you, Chiara. It looks like Marie is not able to connect, but in the meantime...
I'm here, but okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on, but okay, I'm done.
Okay, Marie. Yes, you finished, you sure? Okay.
Yes, I'm okay, and I'm sorry, I will have to say goodbye to all of you in a few minutes. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks to you, Marie. You gave wonderful insights.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have another question. This time it's for Carolina. First of all, I appreciated a lot the work done for the new permanent exhibition, in particular for the last part of it, focused on fascist memory and contemporary art. Nevertheless, when I visited the exhibition, I didn't notice the same intense decolonial rethinking in the first halls. Still, in my opinion, but I can be wrong, a bit affected by an idea of classical ethnographic museum. Was that just my impression, or do you think is there something can be done to strengthen the decolonial process?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. I didn't have the time to illustrate the workshop for all rooms of the new permanent collection, but we held also 2 sets of workshop for the first room and for the second room. But yes, the question is right. I mean, for the first room, for example, we were asked to move some objects and to do some adjustment on the display, but there were not so much critical issues that the people asked us to address. But we wanted anyway to include the fact of the don't have to switch on my webcam. We really wanted to include the subject, for example, of the mines, the mine exploitation in South America, because it was really a big theme in global relation in the 16th century. And regarding the second hall, which yes, have just sort of classic appearance. But, for example, we wanted to stress the attention, and this was made together with the people that we consulted for the second room, to the display of the porcelain chaîne opératoire, the working process of the porcelain, trying to show to the people that all this beauty was originated by a big suffer of thousands of workers from China working in the porcelain process. And I think that this is the only occasion in Italy you can see the whole story told from this about the porcelain process, and the fact that in some extent you see there the same dehumanized production process as you can see in the industry of the 20th century. So that this is the dehumanization of worker. It's a theme that can date back really at the 18th century. So maybe you don't have to maybe be too much fascinated by the beauty and the elegance of the display, but if you look at the caption, you see that we try to include these problematic issues also in the first 2 rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. We have another question, which is I think very interesting for Domenico and for actually all the speakers. So the question is, Domenico's last point about advocacy and the academy is fascinating. The question is for him as well as for the others. How can museums become advocacy academies, spaces where not only people debate, but learn how to do it more effectively? I don't know if Domenico would like to start answering that question, but I'm sure that everyone has something to say about it.
Sure, I can have a, thank you for the question. I think this very much relates to one of the several important points that Marie made in her interventions before, which is about the assumed notion that museums are neutral. Which is something that it's not only something that we have learned through our sort of professional careers to embody, but also something that comes through the very origin of museum practice. Because let's not forget that the first ethnographic museum were essentially originated on the presumption of scientific thinking and using the same logic and taxonomies of science. So I think that there is a question of neutrality that has got a very long thing that is not just a PR or counter PR exercise. So I think that we need neutrality is a crucial question. Now, can museum favor advocacy organization or be advocacy organization. Now, not all museum can, because not all museums have enough of the right people working there. Essentially, that's what it is, because there are certainly there are funding restraints at times. You know, national museums often, because they are directly funded by the state, or regional museum or city museum, because are directly funded by administration, political administration, feel the urge not to upset their political editorial sort of board. But I contend that actually this is more often than not a case of self-censorship. So the more often than not, people think that they shouldn't be doing it, because the times, in my experience, in which people have escalated certain question to political, to high political stance, are as much fewer than those instances where I've seen colleagues not taking political stance just because they thought they couldn't or they shouldn't. So I think that, I don't know if this answers some of your question, but I think that the first important point to be made is that museums can, as long as we don't have people that tells you that museums are neutral, because that's, otherwise we are already defeated. And that's, I think, an important thing. And then I'll just kind of close here, but I would have more to add. I don't want to take too much space.
Okay, if I can jump in, can I jump in? You wanna?
Of course.
Regarding this problematic issue, I really think that we have to be more clear about the advocacy and the part we want to take as museum curator, as museum staff. Sometimes we have very big political constraints, and we saw it very well during the mounting of the new permanent exhibition. We had to fight inside our administration to include a very problematic installation about Indro Montanelli, and this go back to the speech of Marie, because she also showed the statue of Indro Montanelli some minutes ago. So, but we can do it. I mean, we can try, and we, for example, we had very strong confrontation inside the museum and inside the political institutions, but at the end, we made it. So we can take part, we can do our declaration, and we can do it step by step, because, you know, we are public institution with a lot of ties, but I think that step by step we can try to change things. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. Sarah, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I agreed that on the fact that, for example, if the background, the context in which the museum is located, it works sometimes, how do you say, limit a little bit this mission of advocacy. And for example, sometimes we have to consider also international context. For example, for the Museo Egizio is like this. We have to consider that the museum has a lot of relations with the contemporary Egypt projects, and so this not justify because it should be a mission of the role of the museum to be an advocate for in the society, but the real aspects are also involved, the political situation in which we work. We saw it when we tried to launch the campaign for the discount for the Arabic-speaking community, and it had a very big echo, and but it demonstrated that museum action is always a political action in the real sense of the word. But I agree with Domenico that museums should have the right professionals dedicated to this kind of activities, because it's important, because you need to have a background of knowledge of history and of political situation, and so museums are not neutral, and we know it very well. And so I don't have really an answer, but I hope that in the future we will be able to organize advocacy academies also for special topics. I don't know. For example, we try to discuss about the ethical implication of the human remain exhibit, and it all is open. The discussion is always open, because we have to consider that we don't have answers, so we can be spaces for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. Well, really tough issue to discuss. I don't know, there are no more questions. So Domenico, if you wanted to add something, as you said, I could go on, but I don't want to take too much space. If there is something crucial that you still want to say, go ahead, please.
No.
No, enough. Well, I mean, the myth of neutrality, the myth of museums being apolitical institutions is very well known, but maybe just, you know, in smaller circles of museum professionals. And I think that, you know, it's like a fig leaf. No? When we cannot take a political stance because we are apolitical institutions is something that is an attitude that is more and more difficult to sustain. So, as you said, ethics should be at the core of our practice. I think that we really have to delve deeper into these kind of issues, definitely. So, if there are no more questions, which I think is the case. Nope. I think it's been a very long and thought-provoking day, and as I'm convinced that the best museums are the ones that we leave with more questions than answers. I hope this is the case with the conference. It's up to you to you know, to think about what is the most pressing question that you take away with you today. Sorry, I see one message in the chat. I don't know if one late question has come. No. Okay. So I will stop with these remarks, and also reminding those who are following us that tomorrow morning there will be another session in presence at the Mudec, which can be followed with the same, you know, the Facebook pages of the museum and Milano Città Mondo, as well as the YouTube link. And well, thank you. It's been a wonderful day, and thanks for taking the time to engage with us in this wonderful discussion. It's been very inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you.